Welcome to Il Salotto Sessions, the podcast where we dive deep into the world of design with leading architects, designers, and industry experts. I'm your host, Sara Seravalli, and I'm thrilled to take you on this journey through the ever-evolving landscape of design and architecture. Let me share a bit about my background. I spent 16 enriching years in Milan, the capital of design, where I was deeply involved in showrooms and events not just in Milan, but also in Paris and London. In 2011, I made a pivotal move to London when I was hired by one of the specification market's main players to establish the new showroom in Clerkenwell. In 2013, my journey brought me to Scotland, where I founded Design Pop-Up. This initiative quickly gained traction and became a cornerstone in Glasgow and Manchester's design communities, and by 2018 we also expanded to Dublin. However, as the market evolved, I decided to refocus our efforts on Scotland. This led to the birth of Il Salotto, a new venture aimed at creating a virtual and physical space for meaningful conversations and insights into the specification market. Join us as we explore trends, share bios, and uncover the stories behind the creative minds shaping our world. Hello there, and welcome to a new episode of Il Salotto Sessions. Today, I'm very excited to be here with a rising star of the Scottish and UK specification industry is Robin Ellis at Graven. Hello, Robin.
Hi there.
So I found your title on LinkedIn and the articles. You are a senior designer or are you an architectural designer? And if you are an architectural designer, what is it?
Right. So I sort of use the names interchangeably, and I suppose that's because at Graven, we deal with design in so many different ways. We're quite interdisciplinary. We do everything from graphic design and interiors, architecture, and even design thinking. And so architectural design, I'm trained in architecture. I have an undergrad and a master's in architecture. So that's really my foundation. And I've worked in architecture in a variety of ways through residential design as well as in our projects at Graven. However, we do design, we work with design in so many different ways. And so I think it's more accurate to just use designer because we're actually a studio entirely of designers. There's 20 of us, and even our receptionist has a design degree.
I know. My project manager, she's actually an interior designer. I keep telling her she's overqualified to work with me, but there you go. She's still happy, so good for me. So how did you land at Graven? What's your history?
Oh, well, as you may be able to tell from the accents, I'm not Glaswegian originally. I grew up in Canada and I did most of my studies in Canada as well. But then I had the opportunity at one point to come over to Glasgow just briefly. I was doing a master's over in Halifax in Canada and Dalhousie University, and they offered an exchange to Glasgow, and it was meant to be 4 months. And about 2 months into those 4 months, I already knew it wasn't going to be enough. I just fell absolutely in love with the city. And so I kept finding ways to stay for longer. So I managed to stay for 2 years for that stint. I did eventually have to go back and then came right back again as soon as I finished my Master of Architecture and been here ever since. So I worked at a practice doing mostly sort of high-end residential in Glasgow first before I went back to Canada. And then when I came back, Graven was always sort of on my radar, partly because I just loved the opportunity to work on such a variety of projects where you're dealing with such a cross-section of the population and the sort of immersive element of their work as well. You know, we get to really get into what the businesses we work with are all about and how we can translate that through interior environments. So I've been in Graven for coming up on 5 years now, and it's been a fantastic time, and it's always changing, never a boring day, and it's a great team to work with.
Well, you seem to be carving yourself a very important role in the Scottish architectural community. You won the award as a BCO Next Gen Rising Star last year, and then you are all over
well, not only you're here with me today, but that is a consequence of your profile is getting more and more well known across the country. Is this giving you better opportunities, or is it just something you always wanted to, be a spokesperson for the industry, if you like, and be able to talk about new ideas you're working on and stuff like that?
So yeah, I didn't set out to be particularly a spokesperson, but it's been fantastic to have these opportunities. I think one of the nicest things about it too is just the opportunities to sort of meet with people from not just all across the building, the built environment sector, but also so many different sectors that interconnect, and to be able to sort of work on some of the design initiatives on a real civic scale. And yeah,
you're working. I mean, Graven is obviously one of the coolest and most acclaimed practices we've got in the country. Everything you do, it seems to be incredibly cool and innovative and provocative and everything else. So because you've got, as you said, multidisciplinary, so how do you pick what you're working on? I mean, you can go from a children's hospital to an office space to a restaurant to a wedding venue. It's really, how do you select the project you want to work on?
We're always trying to do something a bit different with every project, and to take the brief, but then look for those little opportunities within the brief at how we can push it further and how we can really understand what our client, not just what they're asking for, but what they're trying to do. And then that sort of sets out, sometimes that can, bring, having those discussions, working it through in the studio, that can bring about sort of new ideas or new opportunities within the brief that maybe the client hasn't even thought of coming at it that way. But we always try to find, we always try to pick things where we see, a really good, juicy design opportunity.
Potential to express, to push the boundaries.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So from an immigrant to another, what is it about Glasgow? I mean, you're pushing through an open door with me, obviously. But what is it about Glasgow?
The first thing was just the people. It's a fantastic designed community, and even wider community from that. I think it's something about the size, something about the sort of attitude, people here are quite open, and it's not, I think it's actually, you may have experienced this too as someone new to Glasgow, but I think it's actually quite a good place for people that are new, because there's this real openness. Anyone will chat with you, but this also this sort of confidence in your city, sort of course, why wouldn't people want to come here, And I think that it felt like a city that has just a lot of energy, a lot of a really great concentration of creative people between musicians, artists, designers. I mean, all over the board. And yeah, so I think I was really just drawn to the people and the atmosphere, and that's kept me here for this time too. It's become home.
They have such a lovely way to welcome foreigners, to welcome something new, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Because I've been doing events all throughout the UK and Ireland. Yes, Manchester, when I started, was very, very good. There was a lot of enthusiasm and everything. It was very exciting. Then eventually the city changed because it was such a big market. So I kind of lost my market share because there were more showrooms, more events, and blah, blah, and more competition. Plus, I wasn't based there. But Glasgow, it's the support I got from the city from day one has been incredible. And as much as I think Edinburgh is so beautiful, and I've loved Edinburgh and the people there, they are not as welcoming as Glasgow. It's quite bizarre. It's the West Coast is incredible.
That's what they say, isn't it? Edinburgh's beautiful, but Glasgow has more fun. So
yeah. No, yeah. I lost all the listeners from Edinburgh, but there you go.
But yeah,
architecturally, how do you think Scotland and the UK gives you something different than Canada?
Oh, it's. I mean, that's what I was actually laughing at myself when I said that about Edinburgh and Glasgow, because compared to Canada's so much newer, and so yeah, sure, you've got some historical cities, especially as further east you go in Canada, but nothing like we have here in terms of just the layers and layers of. I mean, that's a really interesting thing about Scotland, about Glasgow too, is just that, design has been an important part of the cities probably since before we even called it design, innovation. And yeah, it makes it a really exciting place to be.
Yeah, there's so much to see a bit all over Europe, to be fair. There's so many different architectural heritage that goes out of centuries and centuries, not just decades.
Oh, absolutely. But yeah, it was definitely getting used to the homes here. Even when I was back in Canada, I used to work in project management for construction. And the first time that I came to understand that the walls of my tenement building were just stone block, then stone rubble, then stone block again, and then plaster, the plaster. Just the fact that there was no insulation in there. And it's just, it was unheard of from where I'm from. But yeah, I feel really, I still live in a old Victorian building, and I feel really, lucky to do that because it's just so unique.
Yeah, it's absolutely stunning. Listen, let's go back to your work now then. I was interviewing Jenny Mitchell the other day. The episode got released today. Yeah, and we talked about Statkraft.
Yes.
Which is also one of your babies.
That's right. Yes, our shared baby.
And a multi-award winning baby.
That's right. Yes, we were thrilled that it, after getting the regional award, went down to London, or our colleagues went down to London, and it ended up taking the national award too. So that was fantastic.
Talk us through about how did it start? What was the process? What did you enjoy the most? What was the most challenging bits of the project, and how did you end up there?
It was a real example of a true team accomplishment. So everything from Jenny mentioned was a project manager who assembled just a fantastic team. And so between services engineers, the structural engineers, the QS, just everyone on board, we had this shared vision for, obviously we needed, the space to work super well, work super hard, be beautiful. But working with Statkraft was a fantastic client because they're right in their core values is sustainability, being a sustainable energy company. And so often when you're trying to make projects sustainable, maybe initially during the briefing period, that will be stated as an objective or stated as a priority. And when conversations come down to budgets in later stages, that can fall away. And it's an unfortunate fact. And I mean, I think many people in the industry are working to change that, but having a client like this, where that is one of their top priorities, helped us. Because often it's, just if we can only push so hard from our end as the designers, but if we don't have the client on board and the rest of the project team as well, then it can be a lot more challenging. And so it was fantastic to have a client that was so enthusiastic about that and committed to that and sort of, willing to put their money where their mouth was and, really just keep that going through.
Yeah.
That's it. And so it was an opportunity for us too to sort of beta test what we had been developing, which was a sustainability tracker system, an eco tagging system. So we were looking at the project from our perspective. We were doing the interior fit out and how we can look at everything that we're bringing into a project, basically. Because, I mean, in reality, the most sustainable thing you could do is, not build anything new. But then you're not going to create this incredible office space for them. So what can we do instead in terms of whether it's looking to the circular market, and by that I mean looking at secondhand and refurbishment, recycling of products, not just products, but also building materials, looking at how we can construct the interior fit outs so that they're demountable or so that they're multi-use. Pretty much all the joinery in the space didn't just act as storage, didn't just act as furniture, but also created the actual partitions through the space as well. So everything was very hardworking. We used a lot of materials that are solid materials. So if you scratch them, you're not rubbing off a veneer, rubbing off a laminated layer, but it's actually just going to, patina and fit into the space for years to come. So there were a lot of considerations, and through I mentioned our eco tagging system. So we were looking at all the different characteristics that you might consider when you're bringing things into a project. So first of all, can we get it secondhand? Can we recycle? Can we upcycle? Can we get it from circular market? And we managed on this project to do 80% of the furniture was reused. So that was from anything from task chairs to soft seating to the sit stand, desk bases, all sorts of items through the whole project. And then, so if we can't source it secondhand, if we can't source it through the circular market, then we're looking at, is it made of natural materials? Is it made of non-toxic materials? Is it recyclable? Is it made of recycled material? And we came up with a dozen characteristics that we sort of worked our way through. So we would map that out at every stage of the project. So we follow the Royal Institute of British Architects stages, and we added in sort of a layer with every pack for the client where we're checking in and tracking the sustainable decisions through the project to make sure that we're all on board. Yeah, and
so your flooring, which was a recycled gym floor, is worldwide famous now.
That's right. Yeah. So that was from Faldhus. Excuse my attempt at a Scottish accent there. Town Hall. So yeah, that was an excellent supplier. That's a good point you bring up, is it's finding those relationships with your supply chain, and sometimes you need to be quite strategic with your procurement methods. We did everything from going to visit local sites. We went to Architectural Salvage, to Glasgow Wood, to even Vintage and Retro. And then also sometimes it was just doing a big eBay search. I mean, a big part of it was that what we learned is that there's no one right way. Every project needs something a little different. And so it's always going to be more work, but it's really worthwhile.
I was about to say, is it not very time consuming?
Absolutely. But I think that's something we need to realize, is that if we want to make high quality projects that are more, environmentally conscious, and then it's going to be more work, because if we just keep doing copy pasting the same thing over and over again, we're not making something as meaningful. Our decisions aren't going to be as impactful, and ultimately we won't have as strong of an outcome in the end. Another, just thinking on circularity with there, another big part of the project, I mentioned teamwork, was, getting the services engineers on board. So we prioritized natural ventilation and, taking advantage of those gorgeous big windows that are inside the garment factory. And also the structural engineers were fantastic, because they looked at our designs and then sort of said, well, if we just change it slightly, we actually could avoid having this big new steel beam, for example. And so we were able to reduce materials that way. But another huge part was the consultation with the client themselves, because one of their goals was to grow, and they were about a dozen people at the time. I think they're now around 50, but they came by. They were able to come by our studio and have regular consultations, and they really took ownership of the project.
Yeah, I'd have heard that they're just around the corner from you guys. going far.
That's right. Yeah, you don't even have to cross the street to get over. So it was a great location for site visits, that's for sure.
So you said, and this is being a bit provocative, so forgive me in advance. You said 80% of the furniture was actually secondhand. So to make my clients feel a bit better about themselves, what can we say to them? Say, listen, I'm still going to buy your new chairs. Don't worry about it. It's not going to be always all recycled and secondhand. So please help me out here.
Well, for one thing, when I say secondhand, it wasn't necessarily just, taken out of a skip and put into a project. It was cleaned up, repainted, reupholstered, restored. So we picked some. We also, when we went and picked upholstery, for example, we were looking at textiles that were made of recycled fibers. Or, for example, with the desks, we used this great product from Quadra that does it's basically compressed textiles that are just compressed into an entire solid surface desk surface. So we put, just for some extra robustness, we did add an edge band to them. But if you were to remove that, you can actually see all of the sort of striation, the layers of textile that have been basically crushed together to form this thing. So yeah, there's all sorts of really innovative new products as well that are doing really interesting stuff and part of that circular story too.
So we can go back to my client and say, listen, if you got any leftovers in your warehouse that people, is a return order or something like, hey, send me the details, I might be able to use it somewhere else.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't throw anything away. Just keep everything in your warehouse. Sooner or later, it will come handy.
That's a really good point. I think that, the networks, I think, are going to be key moving forward. How we work out how to move all of these materials around so that they're because sometimes that's the trickiest part, is that things, they're usable, but they're just not in the right places, or people don't know where they are. So how do we work out some sort of, network where we can make sure that things move back into this circular model rather than going to landfill?
Yeah. So because now with the spaces I'm looking at for the Salotto, one of the units has just been refurbished, and he had a brand new carpet put down. Mm-hmm. But it was like a very dark gray, almost black carpet tile, which is put on for an office, but not for a design showroom. So if I had taken that unit, the first thing I would have done is lift the floor and get rid of it. But it's a brand new carpet flooring.
Right.
Right. So anyway, I'm still deciding which unit to go for. But it made me think it's such a waste, And I start looking at charities that surely a school could do with brand new.
Well, let us know, because Oh, sorry.
Or a community hall, or the Balmacara whole mill that we raised funds last year through AMITSA. Maybe they have a room there. So yeah, it got me thinking.
Oh, absolutely. Because how great of a story would that be for you too, to be able to move in and then be able to help out maybe another organization or something, even if it's not right for the space that you're creating.
Oh, we're definitely going to shout about it, yeah.
Hey, it's good for you, but it's also it's demonstrating that it's possible.
Yeah, true. Mm-hmm. But as you say, it takes time, right? It takes time to research. Yeah. It takes time to upcycle, repaint, reupholster. Mm-hmm. It's not as straightforward as to find manufacturers say, I want 10 of those chairs. What's the lead time on that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We use a term in the Graven studio, which is efforty. That things like this, you have to be a bit efforty,
right?
So basically, it's just rather than doing just what you've always done, to look for an opportunity to make it better. But it's always going to take extra effort.
Yeah, effort.
But it's worthwhile.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's going to be the title of this episode. Let's be efforty.
There you go. Great.
Listen, what is this SwapCity concept that you presented at the BCO Next Gen Ideas? That look quite interesting.
That's right. So we're, if you look at what we were just talking about with Statkraft, where we were, coming into, for example, it's the building itself. The garment factory used to be a completely different use. Now it's been subdivided into office spaces, and then we've come into the office space and we've tried to really reuse as many materials as we could. We also kept stuff that was already on site when we took the space as well. And trying to really plug into this circular network now and transform this, this beautiful old building into into something that works for contemporary working life. And SwapCity is basically stepping back and looking at that on a much larger scale. So the idea came about kind of looking at a couple problems. So housing shortage and the just immense amount of empty, unused office spaces that you see around the city. And not just our city, I mean, you see it in cities all over. And how we can help people throughout the city, whether they're central or whether they're in outlying areas, and really make more practical use of these spaces and just bring our cities back to life. So what it boils down to basically is this idea of this network of swaps between spaces in the city center and areas in the outer reaches of the city. So looking at, for example, places that were traditionally basically designed as areas to move people out to, but perhaps they were utopian ideas at the time, in the 1960s or whenever these sort of towers were built and these suburban areas that have, they'll have housing, they'll have some, high street, for example, but not a lot of support in terms of services.
I call them ghettos. I call them ghettos. Absolutely. What do they say? Dormitory villages. No, how do they call them? For me, it's just ghettos. They're building these huge developments, and there is no heart to it. They're not a shop. Where do you go buy a milk? Where do you go buy your newspaper? Where do you go to the GP? Where do you go for mass on Sunday? I'm not a fan.
And because they're not always as well tied into our transit networks, for example, people can be quite isolated. And so they won't necessarily have the same opportunities that maybe people who live closer to the city center, they're in the city center more often have. And so it's sort of looking at two things. How maybe businesses can, sure, they could keep their main sort of central space in the city center, but also look at setting up satellite offices in these outlying areas. And then there, as a business, I mean, they're accessing a whole new population, a whole new sort of group of potentially very talented people and also different, collaborators, different customers. And they're also offering people a whole new set of job opportunities that are closer to home. The other side of the SwapCity is then looking at, if people want to live centrally, what ways that we can start to adapt these existing empty office buildings into new types of spaces. So residential was what we were first started with, but I mean, you can imagine how it could be retail too. There's so many, I mean, you will have seen it in Glasgow too. You walk around and sometimes, there's some activity on the main level, but then you look up and it's these gorgeous stone, Victorian, beautiful, or Georgian, or, what have you, beautiful buildings. But it's just that all of these floors are empty. And in many cases, over the years, the buildings are wearing down too. And we really need, buildings, for them to survive physically, need to be active and need to be full of people, because the people then are the stewards of the space. And so it also means that there's less foot traffic during the day, during the night, if everyone's coming to the city center, but then decanting back out to the outskirts. So it's looking at ways that we can occupy spaces within the city center and also generate activity in the outlying areas. I mean, I didn't really outright describe it this way, but it's essentially looking at that sort of 15-minute neighborhood idea and how you can make that happen. But the idea with the swaps anyway is okay, so let's look at the basically building stock of the city, and then try to pair up with neighborhoods that need particular, that would be appropriate matches to some of these spaces. And how do we start to swap the actual use? Mm-hmm. But then you could even take it further if you're looking sort of into the future. How do we start pulling apart these buildings themselves and redefining how these buildings work? And then what do we do with all these materials that are coming out of them? Can we build something new with that? And that's where that network, that, talk about a network, comes back in. Is it's this, rather than something sitting in a warehouse, can these materials be on the move and just finding a new home?
Did you hear about Solus's new terrazzo spolia?
I haven't, no. Oh, wait, is this is their terrazzo where they're reusing building materials inside the
Correct.
terrazzo? Is that right? Yes,
Correct.
yes.
Yeah. So that's completely and utterly up your street.
Oh, absolutely. And there's a great example of, sure, it's a new product, but it's also incorporating that circular element as well.
Yeah. So we did a whole podcast with some press about it. And what I love about it is that, one of the main elements that they discussed is that's a way to respect the effort and the thinking that the original architect of that building but talking about a cladding that has been there for 60 years. Surely there is somebody that put a lot of effort, money, and thinking about choosing that specific material for the building. So it's not, there is the economy side of it, there is the climate side of it, but there's also respect for what has been done in the past. Don't throw everything in the bin. Just bring it back to life, as you say. Don't leave it empty. And then this swap thing that you say is interesting because it would have so many effects on a larger scale. Empty offices in the city center mean there is no people, and therefore the main street is dying, and the restaurants are empty, and the shops are empty. So
that's it.
Can we get people in these offices, and therefore, as a consequence, all the other businesses get better chances to survive?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it would generate community wealth. It stimulate local economies. It would support hospitality offerings. It would bring in more cultural offerings, bring in more retail. It all sort of feeds on itself and develops. I mean, I appreciate that. I think to sort of do this exercise of thinking about this swap, you almost have to take a step back and allow yourself to be a little bit almost naive, like sort of take away the things already about retrofit compliance or how our current planning frameworks work, and just think, okay, well, but how could we do it better and then from there start to bring it back and just think about what moves we can make now so that this could actually be a reality. I mean, I think you made a really good point about respecting that history, and it's sort of that it's going to take a shift in our value system. There's so much obsession with shiny and new, and there's so much value in the historic, the well built and of a particular time, and telling the stories that are embedded in these things. And I think that needs to come into how we value things in projects and in products as well.
Yeah,
and
I'm with you there. I love old buildings. They have a story, and I want just to make the best of them rather than just knocking them down and build something horrible instead. Or you could be very, very cheeky. Last summer, when we were judging for the Herald Property Awards, they sent us. It's not. I didn't see this personally, but one of my fellow judges saw that. So there is. I don't know if you are aware that the Scottish government introduced a new licensing scheme for holiday let. Every council can kind of set up their own costs and regulations and criteria. So Glasgow Council and Edinburgh Council, that they need, as you say, there is house shortages. Without going into politics, what I'm trying to say, because in Edinburgh and in Glasgow, you need planning consent. You need to change the planning category from residential to commercial for a holiday let. What they've been doing is buying empty commercial units and turn them in holiday lets.
Oh, interesting.
I thought that was genius.
Right.
By passing a rule, and it's going to be cheaper because it's a commercial unit and not a house or a flat. They don't need to worry about planning permission anymore, and they get a new business set up and running.
That is really interesting. I'd love to see how they are sort of physically modifying them, because I think that's a really interesting strategy, just in terms of making the existing system work for you. And then I'd love to see, because some of the challenges with some of these buildings is just really deep floor plates, or how you get sufficient natural daylight, for example. So I think some of these buildings will require some pretty drastic interventions to really make them work.
A basement, 100%. But for example, one of the units I've been looking for the showroom, it's a stunning third floor. It's got a beautiful New York lofty feel with windows and everything. That would be so easy to turn into a fantastic open plan American New York style loft. Easy peasy.
Exactly. We got to think about all the different ways that these spaces can be used, because if we just sort of stick to our own or our sort of long understood typologies, I think it can be limiting to what the potential are for some of these buildings, some of these spaces. And I mean, it then presents, new exciting opportunities to build something that you may, with those challenges, of course, challenges always offer up new opportunities, and you kind of need something to push against to really start to innovate.
Right. So to close this off, I've been doing these interviews with different girls from the industry. And I started with Gillian Shear, which was one of my superheroes, and she's been around for decades. See the changes in the building industry and so on and so forth. You are a rising star, as we started at the beginning of this episode. So what do you think how do you see the building industry nowadays? Is there any particular challenges that we need to take care of, or is it more a forgiving environment and something somewhere we can be excited to be part of?
Well, first of all, absolutely, it's something to be excited to be a part of, definitely. But when we start to talk about, the experiences, particularly for women or for non-men in the industry, it's sort of like, how long have you got? No. I can't help but start to think about it almost at a society level. Sexism in building sites or in workplaces affects everyone, and it limits everyone. And maybe part of that comes down to our ideas about what it means to be a man in the industry as well. I think the more we strive to a more even and equal and equitable workplaces, the better it is for everyone. It's not just about sort of uplifting women, but it's uplifting everyone. And you can quickly sort of start to talk in stereotypes almost of sort of one universal female experience, but there's so many different elements in people's lives that can impact how they're experiencing the workplace, or even if you step back at when someone arrives to work, what they've experienced out in the street, what they're carrying with them, whether it's maybe they've experienced violence at home, or maybe they've just experienced some sort of discrimination on their way to work, to then arrive in the workplace with that already as something that they've had to face. You can think about how that will affect people's mindset even when they go into work. So I think there's work to be done on a societal level. In terms of just in the industry, there's it's funny day to day. Like, so my name's Robin, which is spelt like the bird, but also like the typically male spelling of the name. Yeah, so ROB with an IN. And the number of emails that I'll be linked in on that say gents, or the number of times that I've shown up at a meeting and they're not expecting a woman just because of my name, because if they haven't, looked up me on LinkedIn or something like that, then they're not going to know. And sometimes, it's sometimes I may work in my favor because
then you arrive with your beautiful smile, hands off everybody.
Oh no, I didn't mean it that way. I more meant in the opposite way, like while I'm still almost incognito, when you're sort of exchanging emails with the assumption that you're one thing and then you arrive and it's another. It's quite good to sort of, I always, you feel a little smug to be like, no, actually, this is who you've been dealing with. But yes, as much as obviously things have come along so far, and I've been really fortunate to not just work with great teams of, all genders, but also some really fantastic female project managers, engineers, QSs, the whole team. but there's still, for example, you mentioned there's award ceremonies. So when all these awards events, they always stipulate a dress code, and the dress code is always related to the man's outfit. So it'll be lounge suit.
Black tie.
Yeah, it'll be lounge suit, or it will be black tie, or exactly. So it's interesting how that doesn't really tell us. I always think, okay, I mean, you can kind of Google it. Like, it'll give you some sort of female equivalent, and of course, I mean, we live in a world where we don't have to live in these defined boxes, but it is very sort of centered on, I think we still use almost like the man, the cis man, the cis white man as the quote unquote normal or standard. But in reality, if we look at the cross section of the population, they're not the majority. I mean, they're still the majority when you look at the high up positions in most organizations, unfortunately. But across the whole society, maybe it's, maybe we need to start setting those just
well, that's easy. I
framing
can do that. I can, all my next events, the dress code is going to be specified by gender.
Or not specified. I mean, I think we need to find a whole new way that doesn't even take.
That's true, because
takes gender out of it.
With gender fluid and stuff like that. So yeah, I should create new criteria that is respectful of any sort of gender.
Yeah, it's interesting how so much, even our language. I mean, in English, it's not as much because we don't. I mean, I speak French too, which is a bit, where gender. I'm not sure if it's the same with Italian, but gender is built right into the way that we conjugate words.
Female,
the way,
male,
exactly. So I think it's a lot of sort of catching up in so many different parts of life in terms of creating a more inclusive society, because languages are, how we express our culture. And so, yeah.
Yeah, there is some jobs in Italy that you only have the male version of it. You don't have the female version of it.
Right. Wow.
Yeah, which is a bit rubbish.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting.
Mm.
So I think, I mean, I like I said, I've had some really great experiences, and, I think that if you asked anyone point blank if they want an equitable society, if they want women to have the same rights, obviously people are going to say they do, but it's those sort of ingrained,
the things you're not
societal things. I mean, even things like just thinking about women's safety. If you're at a job site, and especially in the winter when it's dark late at night, and just making sure that people have a safe route back to, whether it be public transit or whether it be their car. I mean, having safe public transit in a city is a huge part of making it safe for everyone too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. To try to lighten us up, because we got a bit deep and philosophical there.
Yeah.
So plans for us next year, the time pop up, we're going to have 3 events all in Glasgow, because we can't get enough of Glasgow.
Me neither.
The one in June is going to be about sustainability. So this is an official invitation for you to come and talk to us about recycling, reusing, circular economy, and all that jazz.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
I would love to contribute.
You're booked. I'll send you the dates, and you're officially booked.
Great. That sounds great.
Robin, thank you very much for this. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks very much, Sarah. This has been, it's been really fun, and I've been really enjoying your podcast. So yeah, it's great to have a new platform, and I can't wait to see what you do with the showroom, whatever space it is that you end up choosing.
I can't wait either. I'm thinking too much. I've already been working on it for far too long. I want it up and running. I'm going to have whatever space I'm going to have a fully working kitchen. And then I'm going to do my food and hygiene level 2 course, so I can actually make pasta and risotto for you guys.
Oh,
and you can come over for lunch whenever you can choose whether you want bolognese or pesto or pomodorini. You choose, and I'll just bake it. We can have some fun.
Oh my gosh. We're never going to want to go anywhere else. We're just going to be waiting outside your door.
That's the point, isn't it?
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. I think you're going to make a really welcoming, really great space for all those brands too.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Right. Hope to
Mhm.
see you soon, Robin.
You too, Sarah. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much for listening to Il Salotto Sessions. If you enjoyed the chat, please make sure you share with your friends and follow our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcast. For more information on our events, please visit ilsalotto.design and designpopup.com. You can also find us on Instagram _designpopup and Il Salotto Glasgow, as well as LinkedIn. Should you have any feedback, questions, or suggestions, please do get in touch. We would love to hear from you. Thank you.